webinar section will start in about 1 minute. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar section. My name is Boris Cheng. I am the APAC Commercial Manager for Cold Storage Product, Thermo Fisher Scientific. Cold storage products, that means is the refrigerator, freezer, and ultra-low temperature freezer, etc. Together with me, I have Mr. Jeffrey Poon, the Senior Commercial Manager for Biological Safety Cabinet and CO2 Incubator, and also Anita Ng in the panelists. She is the APAC Commercial Manager for centrifuges. If you have any question to ask the panelists, you can also take this opportunity to ask. I also have Shijin, the marketing specialist for the Southeast Asia, Taiwan, to help us in this webinar section. If you just join this call, you will be default on mute. If you want to have, if you want to ask any question during this webinar, please click the raise hand icon on the chat box at the top right hand corner of the chat box, so that we can unmute you so that you can ask the questions. Okay, this webinar section is part of our cell therapy system introduction program, and it's already around the 8th webinar in our webinar program. Okay, let me spend some time to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Dean Ringbolt. I hope that I pronounced his name correctly.
That's okay. Perfect.
Yeah, okay. Dean is our technical application manager for control temperature technology. That means the products include the refrigerator, freezer, and also water bath, chiller, etc. Okay. Dean provides his audit qualification and validation of the assets management expertise in GMP regulated areas. His knowledge is based on over 28 years experience with the large pharmaceutical company, application focus on the development stability. With reference of the standards, bioassay and API GMP labs and facilities. Dean also serves as a primary contact for internal and external audits, and he's also have a lot of experience in audits with the US FDA and Swedish MPA. Today, Dean will share his experience of audits with our attendees. For some of our customers, like the GMP and also ISO accredited customer, audits can be very scary because they might not know what the auditor will ask and then what kind of information they need to prepare and provide to the auditors. Okay, without further ado, I will pass my time to Dean and then for this section. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Boris. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for the gracious introduction. I appreciate that. Again, my name is Dean Rainbolt. I'm actually in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the States, as my location. Hopefully, you've had the opportunity to listen to a few of my colleagues in this series talk about this cell and gene therapy, maybe with Mary Kay Bates, and also a friend of mine, Chris Ronsky, who did a talk on the transition between maybe university and non-GMP areas to a GMP setting. So that it's always refreshing to hear that someone can actually make that transition, because it's a very difficult transition. GMP is the hardest regulations to adhere to. So tonight, or this afternoon, I'd like to talk to you about audits. And instead of just being a boring slide presentation, I'm going to take you through a little bit of an audit. Now, audits are kind of difficult, so I'm going to have to pull one or two pieces out to share, but it should give you an idea of what's happening. I think Boris pretty much covered all of this. I am the technical applications manager for the cold storage division in Asheville, North Carolina. I do have quite a bit of experience in pharmaceutical GMP applications. I've written documents and authored documents with ISBR, ISPE, and the PSDG organizations, all of which are global. I used to manage over 1,600 assets in the laboratory under GMP. So as you can imagine, every time we got an audit, my number came up and I would have to help get the auditors through that. And currently my focus is to help minimize instrument qualification testing length. So in this case, a freezer, instead of qualifying it for 3 or 4 days, we actually wrote a position paper to get us down to 12 hours. So that's been my focus lately. So like I said, the goal for today is I'm going to take you on a trip through the process of an audit. And I'm going to share a glimpse of what questions might be asked. And I might even answer a few of those questions. I'm going to keep today's audit focused on one instrument so that you may use this as a reference in the future. Every instrument is different, but the process of creating the proper documentation and qualification documents are almost identical. You start with a strategy document, go to a procedure, which leads to a protocol, which leads to testing, and then a good filing system and great documentation. Now, if I'm successful today, I'm not going to be able to answer all of your questions, but I will have sparked your interest in asking some questions about your own operation. So when you get back to your lab or your situation, you can take a look and see where there might be a weak spot. Keep in mind, no two audits are alike, but they can be similar in format. And understand that any answer you give in an audit will lead an auditor to the next question. So let's get prepared for the audit. So now let's talk about logistics a little bit. Let's set up, we need to set up the proper space. And usually it's a minimum of 2 separate rooms. So we'll call room number 1 the audit room. This room should be big enough for the auditors to be able to spread out. There should be adequate seating for quality folks, internal business folks, and plenty of places for those auditors to spread out their documents and stuff. And it should also be close to restrooms and snacks, because we want these auditors, because I'm going to be your auditor tonight, so I would love to be comfortable when I come to help you get your product to market. So now room number 2, we need to make sure that that's big enough for your personnel and document review. So this is when I make a request, you're going to have to get documents and bring them in and try to figure out what you're going to show me and how you're going to answer that question. And also, you're going to need to track all the documents that are being pulled. and you'll need to set it up in a easy to present manner. Because again, you don't want me, the auditor, to struggle just trying to read a document. And one important thing, it should not be next to the audit room, because in the prep room, this is where a lot of discussion is going to be had. You're going to be trying to figure out how to answer the question and what documentation to show. And let me tell you, sometimes people in that room don't agree with what should be shown. So it's better that this might be a separate floor, or at least maybe at the other end of the building. So now, who will be in these rooms? So like I said before, in room number 1, or the audit room, we're going to have me, the auditor, and you're going to provide, hopefully, the quality team management. So you got to have quality in there. Local laboratory leaders. So these are the folks that lead the work that's being done in the laboratory. And then any personnel that may need to answer questions. And these folks will be going in and out of that room. Now, room number 2, that will have the local quality persons. And these are the folks that work day to day with the situations and issues that your laboratory faces in everyday operations. So if you have a problem with an instrument or a product or a result, you want the quality people that you go to, you want them in that room, because they'll kind of know what their management is looking for in the answer. You're going to have your lab personnel in there, your chemists, and your lab technicians. Anybody who has trained to answer these questions will be needed in that room. Now, you're going to need runners. You're going to need folks to go get the documentation, and then you're going to need the folks to take it to the audit room. So as you can tell, there needs to be a little bit of planning before an auditor like me ever shows up. So now let's talk about some audit considerations, things to think about. So I expect a tour, and I want to be sure, or you should be sure, to have your most knowledgeable person giving the tour, because this is when I'm going to start asking these questions. Also, you want to consider training before I ever show up. You want to have practiced an audit and trained people how to answer questions, because sometimes I'm tricky and I'm going to ask a question and try to get you talking about the answer, and all you needed to say was yes or no. But if you keep talking, then I can pull more and more and more information out of you. So a good training, audit training program is essential. Now, if you're in an audit and you don't know the answer, that's okay. It doesn't show any weakness whatsoever, and it doesn't show a lack of control. You just simply answer, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I will find someone who can answer the question, and I will get right back to you. And as an auditor, I'm very respectful of that, because I know it takes many, many people to make this laboratory work. So never answer a question that you're not sure of. Because once you answer, I will probably ask you to show me the document to back up that answer. So be ready to present all procedures and personnel training records, because I'll probably want to see those as well. I also appreciate if you're fast to produce any of the documents and the procedures that I ask for. If you're pretty quick about getting that information, that's telling me that you have really good control of your business and you're ready to help answer the questions that I need answered to get your product out. Some basic things is to make sure that everything is clean and properly labeled, and documentation. And I know that Chris, my colleague, he probably dwelled on this over and over again about how documentation is key, especially in a GMP situation. If you don't have the proper, clean, and precise documentation to support any activity, then me, the auditor, I don't consider that a very good thing, and it's going to prompt more questions that's going to go back, that will talk about the control of your business. So let's talk about audit day. So now you think you're all ready. Audit day is here. We're all excited and scared, which is okay. It's normal. So what do? Well, before I arrive, just keep calm. You've got this because you're prepared. So you want to pull in your whole team, meet with all the folks that are involved in this audit. You want to make sure that your primary contacts and your tour guides are present. Because let me tell you, there's nothing worse than getting ready to have an audit and finding out that someone called in sick, or they may have had a little bit of an accident, or a kid got sick and they had to stay home. And you should be prepared with a backup to make sure that you can fulfill the obligations to the auditors. Double check that all the audit rooms are ready. I certainly appreciate it when I go in there and there's some snacks on the table and there's a whiteboard I can write on, and everything is ready for me. Then you'll come out and you're going to meet the auditors and meet them with a smile and show them that you're willing to help in any way possible. The worst way to get off on the wrong foot is if everyone is just so afraid and so scared that they can hardly function even through an introduction. So you might want to get someone who's really good with people to actually greet the auditors and bring them up and get them talking. That always helps out. And remember that these auditors, myself, I'm there to help you get your product to market. We're kind of a team. I have my job to do, and hopefully you've done yours. And at the end of this, when the audit is successful, then a product gets released and customers, patients, whomever will benefit from it. Okay, so let's get started. Let me introduce myself. The audit has begun. My name is Dean, and I'll be your auditor today. So my first request from you is going to be, I would like to get a tour of the storage area of your product, because I want to check out and make sure there's nothing impeding the safety of your product. So I'm going to want a building tour. I want to see where you store the product. And while we're doing this tour, I would like for you to prepare some local procedures about the process of the instrument that we're auditing. I would like to see the safety procedures, not only of the instrumentation, but of the facility. That can include what happens when you pull the fire alarm, what happens if there's bad weather, what happens if there's a chemical spill. So just the general safety procedures need to come up first. And then I would like to see a map of the product path in the building. And I say this because if there's a possibility of this product becoming contaminated from the time it gets to the building, from the time it leaves the building, I'd like to see that and make sure that the proper steps have been taken to keep that product safe. So now during this tour, I'm going to want to see where the product is stored. I want to follow the path of the product getting to storage, to the storage instrument, and then the path for when it's shipped out. So what am I looking for? Like I mentioned before, cross-contamination areas, cleanliness, organization of the storage instruments themselves. The storage instruments that are clearly marked with asset tag numbers, maintenance tag numbers, safety stickers, and are they current? So any documentation that you have on that particular instrument, I'm going to look at those stickers and I'm going to ask to see what document those refer to. And then something funny, that it's going to sound funny, I want to make sure people are working while I'm here. There have been many times that I would show up and tour a building and there's nobody there. And the companies were afraid that I might ask anybody a question. Well, of course I am. I am going to ask the folks working a question, but I want to see things in action. I want to see the dock and how people are taking material off the dock. I want to see in the laboratory that people are putting on their gowns and their glasses and their face shields and their masks. And I just want to get a general feel of what this looks like. So if I walk in and nobody's working, now I'm going to have a trust issue that might be hard to get over throughout the audit. So now during this tour, I made a lot of notes, and I've looked at the instruments that we've stored this product in, and I'd like to see some additional documents. I picked a storage instrument that I want to investigate. It could be a controlled rate freezer, for instance. So one thing that I would ask for, and you'll find this that I'm going to ask this in every audit, is the request for the initial qualification and documents of the storage unit, like the design qualification, the installation qualification, the operation qualification, and the performance qualification, and the maintenance plan. So I want to be sure that you purchased the right instrument for the task, and to be sure it's been properly qualified. And I also want to be sure that there's a maintenance and a requalification plan that keeps this instrument in a qualified state of operation. I would also like to see the last qualification. So by seeing this will demonstrate that you are following your requalification plan and that this instrument is currently operating in a qualified state. I can't tell you how many times I went on a tour and I found preventative maintenance stickers for a change of filters or a cleaning that had been expired. I would also like to see the last year of all your maintenance. So did it break? What did you do? How did you keep your samples safe? So this will demonstrate that you are following your scheduled maintenance plan and that you're properly documenting, there's that nasty word again, document any issues that could arise. Because again, if you show me that you've kept your samples safe, we're good to go. Now, how does this question and answer process work? So I'm going to ask you a question, and someone in that room, they're going to write that question down, or they're going to type it in their computer, and they're going to deliver that question to the prep room. And the reason I'm talking about this process is because it has to be really well coordinated. And some people think audits, you just answer a question, but that's not true. So in room number 2, that's when it's decided what is needed to answer the question. And then you're going to send your runners out to go get the proper documents or get the personnel to answer the question. Now, once those documents are received and reviewed in room number 2 or in the prep room, then that group decides on the best person to take that documentation in and to answer the question. So they're going to come in and might have to wait a few minutes for me not to be so busy. And then I'll look over the document, and if I have a question, then I'm going to ask the question. Now, if I'm not satisfied with the answer, I might request more documents, or someone else who maybe knows a little more or may have can answer the question to that specific item that I've asked about. So it's kind of an open thing. You have to be ready for anything because you will never know what I'm going to ask for. So here's a couple audit questions that I might ask. Why did you purchase this particular instrument? So think to yourself in your organization, when you went to buy that instrument that I'm auditing right now, why did you purchase that one? Why didn't you buy a different one, a different brand, a different temperature? Well, the right answer is it meets the criteria of what was needed for the business as documented in your design qualification. So there's that documentation thing coming in again. So if you performed your design qualification properly, that's the answer to the question. We chose it because it meets the need of storing samples at this temperature with an accurate point value of plus or minus 5, let's say. Okay, another question I might ask, how did you determine how to qualify that instrument? So that's a good one. Did you just think, I'll call my buddy over in the next building and see what they're doing. And then that's how we're going to qualify ours. You would not believe how many times that's been the answer. Or I went to this seminar and the speaker told me that this is how they did it and it passed the audit, so that's why I'm going to do it that way. That's not a very good answer. What is a good answer is first you need to review your regulations. Then you determine the test pass-fail criteria based on this. So you've looked at your regulations, you benchmarked. That's when you talk to your buddy in the next building, or you listen to the seminar. But you need to come up with guidelines. For instance, whatever regulations here in the States, we have the Code of Federal Regulations and the ICH guidelines for certain businesses. So we can actually reference those documents, and that can help us determine a pass-fail criteria for any testing. And then we're going to write this procedure to explain it, and we wrote a protocol to execute the test. Because just like anything else, this is science, and anything that you test, you have to be able to test it again the same way. All right, let's take a look at another one. Where did the rationale for the maintenance plan come from? That's a good one. So think about that one for a minute. The instrument that's sitting on your lab bench right now, and you have a plan written down about the maintenance. How did you come to that conclusion? Because as your auditor today, I've asked that question. Now, the answer should be, first you follow the manufacturer's recommendation, and then you benchmark industry standards, and you take into consideration any special use practices. It may be used every day, or it may be something that's not used very much. So what do you do if the instrument fails a requalification? That's something else to think about. Well, first you move the samples. Then you want to tag the instrument do not use so nobody else uses it. And then inform your quality team that you had a failure, and then they'll decide whether or not that impacted the samples. And then you follow a procedure that you've written for a test failure. So you've already thought out what happens if a requalification test, so that's not a problem. An auditor comes in and I'll ask you, did this thing ever fail, in the last year? And you say, well, yes, it did fail. And then you show me that documentation of the failure, sample movement, and how you manage the instrument, and it's okay. It's fine. It's fine to have failures. So what do you say if you don't know the answer? I don't know the answer, but I can find somebody who does, and that's perfectly okay. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a review and conclusion here. So far, what we've learned is being prepared is one of the most important steps to a successful audit. You have to practice. You need to involve your quality team in everything you do, every step of the way, because during an audit, you're going to be presenting data, procedures, protocols, business plans, everything that comes back down to the quality unit, because they don't necessarily tell you how to do your business. What they do tell you is if you're doing it right. So they're making sure that you dotted your I's and crossed your T's to make sure that you're ready for an audit. Now, you want to remember that the auditors, they're there to help you. And I know auditors, we get a bad rap. We go in, everyone is afraid, and some of the questions, it just seems like, why on earth did he ask me that? Why does that matter? And things like that. And you just have to remember that the auditors that show up, they really want you to pass, but they're also there to ensure 9 times out of 10 public safety. So when your product goes to market, their job is to make sure that you've done everything you can to keep people safe. And all we ask is that you prove that. The other thing that I hope we've learned is to demonstrate control of your business by providing answers to questions and applicable documentation quickly. And I can't stress that enough. Most GMP audits at a big pharmaceutical company, the shortest one I've ever performed or have been a part of has been 3.5 days. I've been in audits as long as 2 weeks. And it's really disruptive when I go in and ask for documentation, and it takes days to get that. So in the back of my mind, I'm asking myself, what does quality do if someone in the lab had this situation and they needed to find the answer? So you want to make sure that you show control of your business and that you have a handle on it. Because let's face it, you should know your business better than anybody. Now, something that's really important is that you only provide the information and documentation that's requested. Because I am kind of tricky. I like the kind of folks that if I ask a question, and I'll give you an example. How do you qualify that instrument? The right answer would be, well, we qualify it per protocol 1, 2, 3, 4. A not so good way to answer that question is, oh, well, we go down the hall and we get this test instrument. And then we take all these probes and we put them in the instrument. And then we turn it on and we wait to see what happens. And they just keep talking. And I love it when they do that because I'm taking notes while this is happening, because I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask about most of the things that you talked about. Oh, probes. Well, how did you determine how many probes to put in there? How did you determine what instrument to use? How did you qualify the instrument that's qualifying your instrument? So as you can see, if you give me the answer per this protocol, that leads me directly to the protocol. I would have to take that protocol and start reading it. And then if I have any questions, that becomes a quality team question because they approve the protocol. So that's just one example of how not to answer an audit question. So let's talk about the common audit flow of events. So audits are very complicated. I've just touched on the surface and tried to touch on some pain points that not only customers have, but what auditors have as well. So in the beginning of this timeline, you want to be able to pick the room location, the local procedures, get them ready. You want to identify the product storage locations, and you want to get the tour ready. I mean, you want to walk that path. And we call all this the initial request phase. And then we would take the tour, and then the questions that I would come up with during and after the tour is about the DQ, the IQ, the OQ, the initial performance qualification, the last performance qualification, maintenance plans, and records of past maintenance and preventative maintenance. So those are the types of questions that specifically would be asked almost in every single audit. Then there's going to be a review. So me, the auditor, I'm going to review all of the documents, make sure that all the documentation was done properly, that everything is initialed. If there were mistakes, that those mistakes were corrected properly, because it's okay to make mistakes on formal documents. You just have to fix those mistakes appropriately. And believe it or not, there's a procedure for how to correct GMP documents. So you want to, I'm going to make sure that all that was okay. And then I'm going to focus on deviations. So a deviation would be, let's say you didn't do a qualification on time, or you went and you requalified your, let's say a freezer, and it failed. What did you do? How did you handle it? Do you have a procedure in place for a failure? I hope so. And then at the end of a typical audit, I'm going to need some time. It's usually we finish an audit at the end of the day, and I go back to my hotel room and I work most of the night to put together a summary of what I found and a list of any issues that I may have had and any questions that I may have. If I feel like everything is okay, I'll call management and say, okay, I'm ready for a final meeting. And they'll set that up for the next day. Usually I try to do it late morning so I can get a little sleep. And in this follow-up meeting, I'm going to present the conclusions of the audit, and I'm going to focus on any unresolved issues. So let's say you did not explain to me very well, and I wasn't happy with your explanation of why you missed qualifying that chamber on time. So I'm going to tell you, I need more, and you're going to have 30 days to give me more information. Situations like that. Usually at the end of that follow-up meeting, they're usually very successful, and we've all learned quite a bit from each other. And 9 times out of 10, we find that with just a little additional information within a week or a month, then we'll be able to make this a successful audit. So the conclusion. Audits, like I said, are difficult and can be. And this was a very small sample of what an audit looks like and kind of a little bit of the background mechanics. So I hope that this information has helped you. I hope it's helped identify areas for improvement in your area that will better prepare you for your next audit. My advice is to make sure you set up an internal audit and include your quality team and start getting more confident with your process so you'll be ready for the real thing. Now, keep in mind, in these, I'm going to call them pretend audits, you want to make sure that everyone understands that if you do find a weak spot in your process, that's what these audits are for. It's not to go getting on people and trying to make people look bad or anything like that. It's to expose possible gaps that could keep you from getting this product to market. And that's why we're a team, is the team the interest is to get this information out and to get the product released. So you may have seen this slide before. The cell therapy systems laboratory equipment, as you can see, Thermo Fisher, we take care of everything. We have GMP focused products like the CO2 incubators, the controlled rate freezers, biosafety cabinets, and the centrifuge. And I think some of those are just available in America right now. Then we also have documentation packages and helps qualify instrumentation. And also we have field service support. Our commitment to the scientific advancement. We offer products and solutions that enable customers to push the boundaries of innovation. We strive on to focus on our customer focus, unmatched. We have an unmatched portfolio by far. The industry leading scale, we're second to none. And the depth of our capabilities, not only do we have really good products, but we have the knowledge behind the product of how these products are used and used properly to be successful. Okay, before I get to the thank you, Mark, I have a little quiz for you. So Boris, do you want to ask the questions, or how would you like to manage this?
Maybe you can ask the question, and then we can ask the audience, try to answer that with the chat box. Okay.
Okay. And let me know, because all I can see is my slides. Just let me know what the answers are. Okay, so the first question would be, how many rooms should you use for an audit and why?
Anyone?
Okay. All right. If there's no answer to that, that's okay.
No.
I saw a note somewhere that you could submit your answers someplace else. I'll go ahead and answer this.
Yes.
So the answer to the first question is 2 rooms. You're going to have the audit room and the prep room. And you want to keep those rooms apart because you don't want the auditors to see the internal workings of your process to get them the right answer. Okay. So another question. What is one of the most critical aspects of an audit? And I mentioned it several times. And in the business, we call it the D word.
Documentation.
Yes, I saw be prepared, and someone said documentation. So that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Both of those are right. Having the right documentation, that makes you prepared automatically. So very good. Now, how important, and this is kind of an open question, but how important is the tour portion of the audit? Would you say it's 25% important, 50%, 75%, or 100% important? Okay, I think, I don't know if there's answers coming in. Oh, I see 100%, 50%. I see 50%. I saw something about operational personnel working normally during the tour. It shows the company is confident and prepared. Yes, yes. So this was a trick question. And I saw 75% that That's right. It was kind of a trick question because it depends on what they're auditing for, but it also depends on how prepared you are. So I always say it's a 50-50 switch of importance or more. So very good. And thanks for the participants for that. I appreciate that. Okay, I have one more question and then we'll open it up. And this is not a trick question. This is one point that if you don't get anything else out of this, out of my presentation, I want you to take this little bit home with you. What team should be present in both rooms other than the business team? So which team do you think is going to be the very most important? Okay, I see one answer there. I don't want to say it yet. Let's see if we get more. All right, well, pretty quick. I see quality, I see lab. So you're right, the quality, your laboratory quality people need to be in both rooms. Your local quality folks need to be in room number 2 or the prep room, and then your quality management or quality leaders need to be in the audit room. So very good, very good. I appreciate the responses. Very nice. So I want to thank you. It has been my pleasure taking you through a very small piece of an audit. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yep.
And if you have any questions, go for it.
Yes, we have some questions. I think this one is the okay, it's from the Q&A box. Could you please a little bit more about the deviation review, because it is very important to when the auditor found out deviation, what the quality team should do to answer that. Or
no, that's a excellent question. In your procedures, you should have already thought about what to do for the situation of a failure. So if you're doing a test, so you're testing a sample and you have a failure, you need to have a procedure in place that will explain what steps you're going to take for that failure. So let's see if I can give you an example. Let's take a freezer. If you haven't noticed, I have a lot of experience with freezers. So if you requalify a freezer and it fails the requalification, in the procedure or in the protocol, it's going to say, if this fails, contact quality and move the samples. So then you're going to contact quality. They're going to have a procedure that says, if someone comes to me and says that a storage unit failed, we need to get this information. What was the monitoring temperature? What was the last qualification date? And things like that. So you have a process for a failure. So you just document through this already existing process. And because like I said, failures are not a terrible thing, but you just want to make sure that you document them. Do you want to answer that? Okay, or do you need more?
Okay, I have 2 more questions similar to that. Okay, first of all, the first one is what are the common mistakes people are making during the site audit? I think that will be similar, like deviation, something like that. Okay. Another one is what will be these circumstances or in what criteria if auditor will fail the audit?
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, very
Just
good
to-
question. So let me answer the first one. The common mistakes that are made is preparedness, and that's why I stress it. And that's why Chris Ronsky, when he was talking about GMP compliance, he stressed documentation so much. Most of the audits that I perform, that some part of the audit has failed, it's because usually you had a failure. So up to the deviation question, and you had not properly thought out what to do in case of that failure. So it's like you figured out how to make the product and how to test the product and how to get that product out the door, but you didn't really put a lot of thought into what to do with a failure and how it affects your samples. So I would say the other mistake would be, I'm trying to think now. The documentation piece is so much. The whole laboratory preparedness. So when I walk into a laboratory, I'm going to check every label. I'm going to check every sticker, PM sticker. I'm going to look at all your chemicals and make sure they're within, that they're not expired. I'm going to look at the cleanliness, and I'm also going to look at the maintenance of the building procedures. So usually I will always actually find something wrong in a lab. They're not showstoppers, but it's always something to watch. So let's talk about a failed audit. I can speak a little bit about this because I've never supported, I've never worked for the FDA or a regulatory audit body. But in the audits, being a participant that I've been in, I got pulled in after an audit failed. And what happens is the auditor will tell you, here's what failed. And there's different seriousnesses of an audit or criticality of a failure. So I might say, stop. You have to stop what you're doing because none of this is right. That is very, very rare. In the situation I was in, we did not agree on the supporting documentation for the validation of a chamber that we were using. So the FDA said, we don't like how you are doing your qualification. So what they do is they call that a finding, and we have to respond to that finding to show that our product was okay and our samples were safe, and the data that we produced from that instrument is a good data point. So then our scientists and engineers and everybody pulls together and we answer that question. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be okay, but it really sets you back on your heels sometimes when that happens. So like I said, there's 2 kinds. The total failure is they pull the switch and shut you down. That hardly ever happens. The other one is they just need more information, and it could delay you getting your product to market quicker. And then you may have to change some procedures. They might say, okay, this is okay, but we want you to do it like this, or work on this to make it better. I hope that helped.
Yep. Okay. We have 2 audience ask the same question. Okay. They ask, the design qualification, should that be prepared by the user or by the equipment company? And should the DQ bear some degree of relevance to any product specification, something like that?
Okay. I'm going to answer the second part first. the DQ, the design qualification, that's exactly what you need to put in there. That's probably one of the best questions I've received in one of these seminars so far. So congratulations. You really get what needs to be in that DQ. So my successful DQs that have been audited by the FDA have stated, I bought this instrument because I'm going to store this product in it at plus or minus 75 degrees C, at plus or minus 10 degrees C peak variance per our procedure, and then you list a procedure number. So that shows that you thought it out, you know what it's supposed to be, and that's exactly why you bought that instrument. So that's very good. The second part, Boris, can you run that by me one more time? I didn't, it almost sounded like there was a third party in that, but I didn't get it.
So should the DQ bear some degree or relevance to the product specification?
Oh, I answered that one. So that answer was yes. What was the first part?
The first part will be, who should own the responsibility for the design qualification? The end user or by the equipment manufacturer?
Okay. If I understand the question correctly, the site qualification, so the actual building, the laboratory, and the inner workings, that can go a lot of different ways. If you have someone, whoever is in charge of maintaining the building and maintaining the laboratory, the temperature, if you have gases pumped in, if you have purified water, if you have CO2 or whatever gets pumped in, then whoever is in charge of that is who gets to answer those questions, because that's their responsibility. At the company that I worked for, we had a third-party engineering group that managed that. So we would make the request, hey, we're going to build this laboratory and it needs to do this. You need to make sure that that's right. And so they would have their own engineering specifications that would fall under that audit. So I hope that answers.
Yeah. Okay, this one is a very interesting question. We have audience ask how to be an auditor. So how to be an auditor, or how did I become an auditor? Because to prepare the audits, the best way is to learn how to be auditor and then learn what kind of questions will be asked by the auditor so that they can be prepared and then to answer those questions. So, wow. So the question
I must say I am totally impressed. No one's ever asked me that question, and I think that's another great question. So to become an auditor, the thing you need to do is to work with, let's say you're a quality person and you want to become an auditor, reach out to the people in your area if there are other auditors there, and then find out what training that they've had. So there's groups in the US. One of them is an engineering group, the ISPE, and those are that pertains to facilities and instrumentation. And they have seminars that you can go to, and they call it Audit 101. And then there's more audit classes. And then there's other groups for the International Society of Biobanking, or ISBR. That's another group that I'm associated with, and they also, when they have seminars or global meetings to get together, they will go through audit training. And then the best thing is to look at your regulations and become the expert of that area. And once you become the expert, then you can ask those questions. One other piece of advice I have is to look at your governing regulatory agencies in your country, and they should be posting warning letters and failures, because usually that's public knowledge. And you can go in and find out why other companies had a failure or a warning letter, and that will help you formulate questions. So good luck. Auditing is fun. I enjoy it. So.
Okay. So the other questions is, do we need unexpected internal audits? Like you said, you would like to see normal working status in the lab. So should we prepare for unexpected internal audits or external audits?
Absolutely. So the best thing to do is maybe once a year, the leaders of the group, of the laboratory, and the quality group should get together and don't tell anybody until maybe a week before and say, we're going to have an internal audit. And then you will have already picked your auditors and the folks that will participate. Now, in an internal audit, you don't need to have 2 rooms. It doesn't need to be that formal. An internal audit should consist of at least 1 quality person, 1 business person, someone who has put the audit together. So hopefully this is a person that they may have a feeling that they're weak in a certain area. So they want to expose that weakness. And another person to have is an auditor from a whole different area. Someone that really doesn't know a whole lot about your area, because they're going to ask different questions that you're not going to think of. And if you do this every year, you're going to be ready for an audit. But I wouldn't make it a scary thing. And also, I wouldn't make it, too many times I've seen people do internal audits and then everybody gets all mad at each other. And there's no reason for that. There's so much that goes on in the laboratory. We're bound to have gaps. And there's always places where we can get better, and this is how you get better. So, and also use it as a opportunity to build confidence, because if folks are used to being audited, then when a real auditor comes in, it's going to be nothing for them.
Okay, thank you. Because of time, I think it will be the last question. How long should we keep the personal training records, and would that be different from authority to authority?
Okay, that's a good question, because I cannot answer that. You would have to look at your regulations and see. There's usually a document retention procedure. If you don't have one, you should probably get one or write one. And somewhere in that document retention, it should mention training documents. Obviously, training documents only mean something to me. If I'm looking at a result and there's initials and a date from 2 years ago, I just want to see that you have that document. So I think that we keep things for 7 years. I think that's what so it's either 7, and then I think some companies are afraid and they keep it for 12. But
yeah, I had that number also. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. We already over time, so I think we should end our section here. So special thanks to Dean Ringbert for his very informative, interesting webinar about audits and the audit journey in 2020. Special thanks to Shijin. She's the moderator and set up this event, and also Anita and Jeffrey Poon for their work, for their help in making this section happen. Okay, thank you.
Great.
If you
Thank
still
you.
have any question, you can just send those questions to me or the panel team with your email so that we can answer those questions. Thank you, Deans, and thank you all the audience. Thank you for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.